Have you ever sat in a room full of family and still felt completely alone? You smile at the right moments. You laugh softly when someone tells a story. But somewhere in the middle of all that warmth and noise, your heart feels cold, distant, like you're there, but not really seen. And sometimes the silence between the calls stretches too long. The visits become shorter, less frequent. Birthdays pass with just a text, or maybe not even that. And you sit with that quiet ache and wonder, when did my place in their hearts start fading? It's a heavy question, not because you're weak, but because you loved so deeply. You showed up, again and again, through scraped knees and sleepless nights, through graduations and heartbreaks, through every season of their growing lives you were there. And now it feels like they've moved on, and you're the only one looking back. Let me tell you about Helen. Helen is 72. She raised 2 boys who grew into tall, capable men. She was the one who kept every photo, every drawing they ever made. She stayed up late sewing Halloween costumes, taught them how to ride their bikes, and worked night shifts to make sure they never went without. But these days, her phone stays silent. Days go by without a word. She scrolls through social media and sees their lives unfolding: vacations, promotions, birthday parties she wasn't invited to. And quietly, she wonders, did I stop mattering? One morning, she said aloud to herself, I think they've stopped caring. And the words stung like a wound she didn't know she had. But here's the truth, one that doesn't come easily, but carries freedom in its heart. You can't measure your worth by someone else's attention, especially not your children's. And that brings us to the first emotional truth, one that sets everything else in motion. Their distance is not a reflection of your value. It's a hard pill to swallow, especially when the love you gave came from your bones, your soul. But sometimes, people pull away, not because of what you did wrong, but because of where they are in life. Some grow self-absorbed, some avoid the past, some carry their own wounds they don't know how to name. That doesn't excuse the neglect. It just helps you stop taking it personally. Because if you believe their silence means you've failed, you'll start chasing their time, their attention, their love. And every time they don't answer, you'll shrink a little more, until one day, you forget that you were once the center of your own life. Helen used to call her sons every Sunday. She'd ask about their week, listen to stories about people she'd never met. They rarely asked about her. She'd hang up smiling, then cry quietly in the kitchen. One Sunday, she didn't call, not because she didn't care, but because she needed space to remember herself again. That week, she signed up for a pottery class. She went to the library. She made soup not to send to anyone, but for herself. And when her son finally called the next weekend, she didn't answer right away, not out of anger, but because she was out walking, soaking in the sunset. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. Because here's the second emotional truth. Your peace begins the moment you stop begging to be seen. There's nothing wrong with wanting connection. It's human. But there's a difference between longing for love and living in a state of emotional starvation. When you spend every moment trying to remind others that you exist, you start to disappear to yourself. You don't need to become cold or cut people off, but you can choose not to make yourself smaller, just to stay close to someone who's drifting. That's what Caleb realized. Caleb, a retired contractor with rough hands and a gentle heart, used to drive 2 hours every month just to visit his daughter and her family. He'd bring gifts, fix leaky sinks, mow the lawn. They'd thank him, then send him on his way. One day, he asked his daughter if they could plan something together, just the 2 of them. She said, "Dad, I'm really busy right now. Maybe next time." There was no next time. Caleb stopped making the drive. He didn't stop loving her. He just stopped overextending himself to prove that he still mattered. And slowly, he rediscovered something powerful, the joy of being with himself. He built birdhouses. He joined a community garden. He made new friends, not because he was trying to fill a hole, but because he was finally giving to himself what he had poured into others for so long. And that leads to the third truth. You cannot force someone to care, but you can stop handing them the pieces of you they won't hold. Love should never be a performance. And when your children forget to show up, it doesn't mean you're unworthy. It means it's time to start showing up for yourself, not in defiance, in dignity. And if you're sitting with that aching question, when did they stop caring? Maybe the deeper question is, when did I stop caring for myself the way I always cared for them? This isn't about giving up. It's about gently turning inward, finding the soft, steady parts of you that have been waiting to be remembered. It's about reclaiming the space in your heart that has been rented out to disappointment and filling it with your own light. Because even if they never call, even if they never come back, you are still here, breathing, becoming, and your story is not over. There's a certain kind of heartbreak that doesn't make a sound. It doesn't arrive in a sudden, dramatic moment. It creeps in gently, quietly. Over time, it's the silence after a long day when no one calls, the birthday card that never arrives, the way your name slowly fades from their everyday life like a photo left too long in the sun. And yet, somehow, you still find yourself hoping, maybe next week, maybe next month, maybe they'll realize, maybe they'll change. But here's something I want to say to you gently. With all the tenderness in the world, hope should never hurt you. That's the fourth emotional truth. It's beautiful to keep your heart open. It shows your strength, your resilience. But when hope turns into self-neglect, when it keeps you clinging to people who have stopped holding space for you, it stops being healing and starts being harmful. Margaret learned this the hard way. She spent the better part of a decade hoping her son would come back into her life. He had distanced himself after a disagreement. Nothing loud, just one of those misunderstandings that never quite healed. She reached out every holiday. She sent photos of the grandkids. She even mailed him his favorite childhood dessert one Christmas. No reply. And still, every year, she hoped, until one afternoon, she found herself sitting at the kitchen table, holding an old birthday card he'd made her in grade school. The paper was yellowed, the edges curled, and for the first time, instead of warmth, she felt grief, not just for the distance, but for the years she had put her own life on pause, waiting for someone else to press play. That was the day she decided to stop waiting. She didn't stop loving him, but she stopped sacrificing her present for the possibility of a different past. And that decision led her to the fifth truth, one that sets the soul free when nothing else will. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. We are taught that to forgive means to open the door again, to welcome people back with open arms. But sometimes, the person you need to forgive is the one who won't return, or worse, the one who keeps returning without ever truly seeing you. Forgiveness, in its truest form, is a gift you give to yourself. It's saying, I release you from the power to keep hurting me. It's not a denial of what happened. It's not pretending it didn't cut deep. It's simply letting go of the need for resolution before you allow yourself to heal. Grace understood this. Her youngest daughter had grown distant, blunt, dismissive. Every phone call turned into a storm. Every visit ended with tension. For years, Grace told herself, she's just stressed, she'll come around. But she never did. And one day, after yet another teary conversation, Grace decided to stop hoping for a version of her daughter that didn't exist. She forgave her not because she asked for it, but because Grace needed peace. She wrote a letter she never sent. She poured every hurt, every memory, every unspoken word into those pages. Then she folded it up, placed it in a drawer, and lit a candle beside it. She said out loud, I forgive you, and I release myself. That small act didn't fix the relationship, but it healed something deeper. The part of her that was holding herself hostage to someone else's love. You don't need to carry every relationship with you into the next chapter of your life. Some were only meant for a season, and some, though they began in love, no longer feed your spirit. And the sixth emotional truth, the one that rises once all the others have been lived, is this. You are allowed to live a joyful life, even if your children are not part of it. This may be the hardest truth of all, but it's also the one that opens the door to freedom. Chloe, a soft-spoken woman with a silver braid down her back, told me once, I kept waiting for my children to give me permission to enjoy my life again. I thought, if they saw I was happy without them, they'd be offended. But then I realized I was the one withholding permission. She had spent so long believing that her happiness depended on their involvement. that every joy had to be shared to be valid. But then one autumn, she went on a trip alone, just a weekend away, to a small town with bookstores and river walks. She brought a journal, a camera, and a new red coat. She said she hadn't felt so free in years, and when she returned home, something felt different. Not because her children had changed, but because she no longer lived in waiting. She lived in presence, and that presence whole, beautiful, and self-contained wasn't lonely. It was full. You see, healing doesn't always come with a phone call or a hug or an apology. Sometimes it comes in the silence you learn to fill with your own voice again. Sometimes it comes when you sit with your sadness and say, "I see you, and I love you, and now we move forward." This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop needing. It means you start building a life that shines whether anyone notices or not. Because you notice, and you are enough. You have always been enough. There's something powerful that happens when you stop living in the echo of what once was and begin stepping into the sound of your own life again. It doesn't happen all at once. It's not a sudden awakening. It's quieter than that. It begins in small choices. The decision to make a nice breakfast for yourself instead of eating standing at the sink. The walk you take not because someone invited you, but because the sun was warm and the breeze was gentle. The laugh you let rise from your chest, even when no one else is in the room. That's when the healing begins. Not when your children call, not when the apology finally arrives, but when you stop waiting and start living. Ryan, a 74-year-old man with a weathered face and eyes that still twinkle when he talks about old music, told me something once I'll never forget. He said, "I spent years trying to be the kind of father they'd want to come back to. But the moment I started being the man I wanted to come home to, everything changed." At first, he meant it literally. He started making his space feel like his again. He redecorated, started playing jazz records in the evenings. He stopped waiting for the doorbell and started lighting candles just for himself. But soon, something deeper shifted. He became softer, quieter, but also stronger, not in the way he used to be, protective and ever-giving, but in a way that came from within. His son did come back eventually, but not because Ryan begged. He came back because something about his father's peace drew him in. It was as if, in releasing the pain, Ryan became magnetic. Not because he chased love, but because he embodied it. You see, when you stop clinging to others to prove your worth, and instead begin to live your worth, something opens up. Not just in your relationships, but in your soul. That's what happened with Sophie, too. She had 3 adult daughters, and for years, she tried to keep up. Group chats, family brunches, remembering every birthday, every anniversary. But slowly, the effort became one-sided. Her texts went unanswered. Her calls went to voicemail, and she felt herself disappearing. Until one morning, she looked in the mirror and asked herself a simple question. What if they never change? The truth landed in her chest like a stone, but it didn't sink her. It steadied her, because in asking that question, she gave herself permission to stop trying to control the outcome and to start finding joy anyway. She joined a knitting circle, not to distract herself, but to connect with others and with herself. She began volunteering once a week at a nearby shelter. She started dancing again, barefoot in her kitchen, to the music of her youth. And then, one day, her middle daughter called not out of obligation, but curiosity. "Mom, you seem so different. Are you okay?" And Sophie smiled, a quiet joy in her voice. "I'm more than okay. I'm finally becoming myself again." That's what emotional freedom looks like. It's not a life without sadness. It's a life where sadness no longer drives your decisions. You stop doing things to be noticed. You start doing things because they matter to you. You stop performing for a seat at someone else's table. You build your own table and discover it's not so lonely when you fill it with the things that nourish your soul. And here's the beautiful twist. When your children stop being the center of your emotional life, they often start seeing you in a new light, not as someone dependent on their affection, but as someone quietly whole. That shift doesn't guarantee reconnection, but it opens the door, and even if they never walk through it, you're no longer standing there holding it open, growing cold in the wind. You're inside, safe, warm, living. Jack, who spent most of his 70s trying to reconnect with a daughter who had pulled away, told me that when he finally stopped chasing and started living again, he felt lighter. "It's not that I don't love her," he said. "It's that I love myself too." Now, that balance is what sets you free. You begin to experience your days not as something to survive while waiting for someone else's attention, but as something to savor. You read books, you plant flowers, you write down your memories, not to be remembered by others, but to remember yourself. And in that space, something returns. Joy. Not the loud, youthful kind, but a deeper kind. The kind that comes from living in alignment with your own truth. The kind that rises when you stop needing others to validate you. This joy becomes your companion, your guide, your mirror, and when people see it, your children, your friends, even strangers, they may not always understand it, but they'll feel it. They'll sense the peace you carry, the light you no longer dim, and maybe, just maybe, they'll come closer. But even if they don't, you'll still shine, because you are no longer living for the call, the visit, the apology. You are living for you. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You only need to stand firmly in your light. And when you do, something inside you says, "I'm home." If you're still here, still listening, still feeling these words in your chest, then I want to say something you may not have heard enough lately. Thank you. Not just for your time, but for your courage, for your willingness to sit with emotions that many people avoid. For showing up not only in this video, but in your own life, even on the hard days. Especially on the hard days, I know what it feels like to keep loving someone from a distance, to watch the silence grow longer, to carry a heart full of memories while the phone stays quiet. I know how heavy it can be to pour your whole soul into raising children, and then wonder if they still see you. But here's what I also know, something quiet and powerful. You have never stopped being worthy of love. You are not a burden. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are here, still growing, still glowing. And these emotional truths about letting go, about self-respect, about living again even without their approval, are not meant to close your heart. They're meant to open it, to let your own light back in, to remind you that you are allowed to enjoy your life even when others don't notice, even when they don't call, even when they never come back. Because the deepest form of freedom doesn't come from being accepted. It comes from accepting yourself. I hope you feel that tonight, or tomorrow morning when you open your eyes. I hope something soft stirs inside you, a memory, a smile, maybe even a tear. Not because you're sad, but because you're waking up to something real and gentle within you that's been waiting for attention. And if this video has brought you any comfort, any sense of being seen, I'd love to hear your story. Maybe there's a part of you that's been quietly waiting to speak. Maybe you've been carrying something for years with no one to hand it to. If it feels right, share it in the comments below. Because when you speak your truth, you might not just heal yourself. You might help someone else breathe a little easier too. Has your relationship with your adult children changed over time? What helped you cope? What helped you grow through it? This is more than a video. It's a small space where you are allowed to be honest, tender, brave, human. And if these kinds of conversations matter to you, if you'd like to keep walking together in this space where quiet healing lives, I'd love for you to subscribe. Not out of pressure, just as a gentle way of saying, let's keep growing together. You are not too much. You are not too late. And you are certainly not alone. Take care of your heart. Water the parts of you that have gone dry. Wrap yourself in the warmth you've given so freely to others. You are still becoming, and your story, yes, even this part is sacred. Until next time, walk gently and live fully. You are deeply loved, and you are free.